How we doing, everybody? We're here to talk about Totally Killer on Prime. So let's find out my thoughts right now. Stay tuned. All right, Totally Killer. Hello, welcome to Prime. We're going to be talking about that today, but before we do, remember, I am your host, Frank Zanca. I'm an award-winning screenwriter and novelist and comic book writer. And speaking of comics, I'm glad you asked. My new comic is up on Kickstarter right now. It is Lords of LA #2. So this is the sequel to this one. We wrap up one of the storylines with the Lords of Vegas, and it's a story of an exotic lounge singer who kind of gets caught in a lust triangle of possession, and she's turned into a vampire and is forced to leave her town with thoughts of the fact that she might hurt her newborn child. So she abandons her family completely and then compiles wealth and knowledge and training and everything else to have enough power to come back 60 years later and do her revenge on the crime families of Hollywood. So it's a lot of fun. It's got a lot of sex, blood, gore, action, vampire stuff, and we have Marilyn Monroe making an appearance as well. So check that out on Kickstarter. You can click on this side. You can click on the QR code or the link below. We are only like $1,000 from completing our goal and getting into stretch goals, getting free stuff. And if you're watching this, before Wednesday, the 8th, the 8th is when the early bird specials end. So jump on that as soon as you can. All right, and thank you guys so much for everybody else who has helped us achieve that goal as it is now. All right, so let's move into the review. And we are talking about Totally Killer. I got a chance to watch that today on Prime. I was having lunch, and I'm like, all right, let's watch something. And I bumped into this thing, and I'm a big fan of Kiernan Shipka, who, of course, played Sabrina, the teenage witch. And she was also, I think, John Hamm's daughter in the show that he did, the 50 show that he did. Mad Men. Yeah, because it was Manhattan. So anyway, she was in that. I think that was one of the first things that she did. She was pretty young in that. And then I haven't seen Olivia Holt in a while. She did that really bad Cloak and Dagger Marvel thing, they were not Cloak and Dagger. I mean, that was really bad. It was like CW bad. It really didn't match the characters at all. They didn't even try. But Olivia Holt is hit or miss, but I think she hit it in this one. So the storyline for this is they even reference Back to the Future. So throughout the entire movie, they reference Back to the Future. So it's about a girl whose mom is played by Julie Bowen. Also a big fan of Julie Bowen from Modern Family, and I wish she did more, but she has a very small role in here. And so Olivia Holt is the normal angsty teenager, and she is her mom is a survivor of this Sweet 16 killer. So there was 3 girls that were killed that were all friends of hers that were stabbed 16 times each. And when the killer goes after the mother, which is Julie Bowen again, so it's kind of like the new updated Halloween, where she taught her daughter how to have physical contact and fighting, so that she was ready for the killer and all this stuff. And so we have a pretty good fight scene with Julie Bowen, which is pretty interesting. But anyway, her friend is making a time machine, and the killer chases her in there, and we go back in time. So, which is really off the cuff. But she goes back to the 80s because a lot of, shows right now are very focused on the 80s. It's very interesting that the 80s is so revered. But yeah, I mean, look how many shows go back to the 80s because the 80s just had a lot of personality. It was really a good time. Of course, I lived through the 80s. So it was an odd time. It was a fun time. I don't think we had the problems that we have now, which is really funny because they actually make social comments about the 80s, about the things that are not allowed now that were very obvious back then that it was no big deal. Like the mascot for the thing was an Indian, and like, oh, and there's the racism. And then, the guy's wearing a T-shirt that says FBI, and he's like, I forgot what it was. It was like fondling boobies, something inspector or something like that. And she's like, "You're inappropriate. Your shirt's inappropriate." And then you hear the girlfriend go, "I like your shirt."
I'd like to report a crime that hasn't happened yet. Have you seen the movie Back to the Future? Basically, I'm living that movie right now, which is how I know there's going to be a murder tonight.
Hate time travel movies. They never make any sense.
And everybody in it is smoking, so of course they play it up where she gets out of the car and the whole car is filled with smoke, which doesn't happen. But even one of the women I think she had a jacket that actually my mom had. It was pretty interesting. Kind of like one of those big hammer jackets. Anyway, I laughed through a lot of it, and I was pleasantly surprised by it that I actually got drawn into it, considering the fact that it was not a new idea at all, and it borrowed from a lot of different things. And the people who wrote the screenplay, there's three of them. 2 out of 3 of them had really never written anything before. They have like 2 credits to their name, and then one, has more. This Jen D'Angelo has more. The other one is like an actress, and the other guy has like 2. She wrote like Workaholic. She wrote that new Quiz Lady, which I haven't seen. Stuff like that, and so it's funny that you have 3 writers in there, like Sasha Pearl Raver. She's an actress, so it was interesting. Also, the girl from Scream was in it. So there was I think I had a good cast, and they had good comedic timing, which is interesting because Kernan Shipka, she really, I never really saw her comedic timing, but in here she definitely had it. She's very straight. She says her jokes very straight, and I think it comes off pretty well. And it was directed by, I'm gonna mess up this name completely. Nachaka Khan. I kind of want to sing it. Nachaka Khan. I'm sure that's not how you say it, but that's how it reads. But anyway, she did Fresh Off the Boat, which I was a big fan of. And so we have a mixture between, and even the ending is almost more like a low budget, version of Back to the Future, where they're on a ride instead of going onto the roof of a thing. So, and the killer reminds me of like a cartoon character. I can't place the mask that they used, but he has like the blonde pompadour. It's like, I forgot what it was called, but it reminds me of some kind of a video game or something like that, or advertisement. Anyway, it was a cartoonish character. But it worked here because he's got this real weird grin and stuff to that effect. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed this film. It kept me engrossed. And again, it was absolutely nothing that was new about this. It was completely a borrowed movie. So, and they reference Scream, and they reference this, and all this stuff. She walks around and says, and Randall Park is in it also, obviously from pressure off the boat. So I'm sure that was a favor. And it even says, "Have you seen Back to the Future?" Well, I'm Marty McFly, and in this scenario. So so I like that. And then there, of course, they talk about Terminator, and they talk about all this other stuff. But it's interesting for them to see what they found appropriate back in the 80s. And I found that funny because, of course, living through it, I have the same opinions now when I hear people complain about stuff that 20 years ago. Well, actually, it's 40 years ago now. That 40 years ago, it was like commonplace. Nothing was offended anyone back then. Everybody just talk shit, and nobody cared. There was no racism. There was black shows. There was multiracial shows. There was everything was out there. Nobody cared. Nobody cared. You know, there was Barney Miller. There was, the Jeffersons. There was, it was everything was out there. Then we were early '90s. We had Crockett and Tubbs, and everything. There was no racism back then. Today it's racism that, racism this, and back then it was just commonplace. The biggest star in the world was Michael Jackson. Biggest star in the world was Michael Jackson, and nobody thought about anything of it. Eddie Murphy was doing stand up, and again nobody said anything. Fat Albert was a huge kids show, and the Cosby Show, and all this stuff was happening, and nobody cared. Nobody cared. So I don't know. I think we've kind of gone backwards from the 80s and early 90s. I think we're going backwards. And this film kind of shows it. I think it kind of displays how touchy everything is. And they're in fact the group is which remind me of the Heathers. So I don't know if you've seen Heathers, but if you haven't seen Heathers, you should see Heathers. It's a very excellent film. Put Christian Slater on the map. And so these guys ones are called the Mollies. Each one of them dresses up as a different version of Molly Ringwald in one movie or another. The fashion of the 80s will never be replaced. That was probably aside from bell bottoms in the 70s, but the 80s had such a unique look with the big hair and all that stuff that there will be no other decade that will ever match it. So in fact, that stuff might come back one day. So anyway, I remember watching it. It's free if you have Prime, it's free. So I recommend watching it and just have a good time with it. And I think that the actors had a good time with it, and you can tell that there was a lot of camaraderie between the actors, and I think the writing was decent. Not great because they borrowed from everything in the world, but it is what it is, and I don't think they expected it to be anything else. They're not reaching for the stars. They're like, hey, let's just make a fun little movie, and that's what I got. And it's nice to turn something on, where I can just have fun with it. So, all right, that's it for me. So tell me what you guys think. If I was gonna rate it, I would probably rate it an 8. Not great, not above average, but good and fun. And remember to like and subscribe because I'm trying to build a channel. But I'll put the QR code up here real quick for Lords of LA. If you can help support us, support indie comics. These are 48 pages, so it's not a small little 20-page thing. And it tells a neat little story that I'm hoping to continue. But the second one will wrap up one of the other B stories. So, we're going to have Were Panthers in there, and so we have monsters and everything else going on at the same time as, we got this kind of, I don't want to call it a love triangle, but it is kind of a lust triangle. Anyway, check it out. And if you can help support, please do. I will have other videos of mine pop up over here. We do reviews for comics and as well as films and things to that effect. And we do board games as well. All right. Thank you guys so much. You guys have a good one. And I appreciate you watching all the way through. All right, bye-bye.